Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. Not too long ago, somebody told me, well, everyone told me, that there'd be one thing you couldn't see coming this week. And it turns out, it has nothing to do with TIFF. It's some audio interference in the episode I expected to release today, and I haven't been able to fix it in time. I'll get there, but we'll save it for the theatrical release. Instead, I'm reaching back to the earliest days of the podcast, in July 2015, when I sat down with my friend Chandler Levack to talk about the 1998 teen comedy, Can't Hardly Wait. Why this episode? Because Chandler's at TIFF this year with her first feature, a terrifically complicated coming-of-age picture, I Like Movies, that had its world premiere on Friday and has already become one of the festival's buzziest titles. It's screening again at 6:30 p.m. tomorrow, Wednesday, September 14th at the TIFF Bell Lightbox 3, and on Friday, September 16th at 9:45 p.m. at the TIFF Bell Lightbox 2. It's really great. And ever since I saw it, I've been thinking about this conversation and how prescient it was about so many things. Honestly, it's also just nice to hear Dexter jingling around in the background again. So here we go. From the vault, this is Someone Else's Movie. Can't Hardly Wait is one of those movies that I wasn't expecting to be a touchstone, but of course it is. I'm just in the wrong bracket. I saw it when I was already, I guess, 30. Mm-hmm. And so I can look back on it and go, oh, that was a fun comedy that plays its pieces really well and arranges everything nicely, but I don't share the immediacy of it, and you would have been much younger.
Yeah,
so.
I was 12 when I think I watched it, and I think the reason I picked it is because it just coincided with this time in my life. I think I was grade 7. I had this group of friends, and we did everything together, and we had nicknames for each other, and we all had the same obsessive crush on this one boy, and we had this giant notebook that we would write this kind of continuing short story that was our weird prepubescent fantasies about what it would be like to date this boy that we didn't even really know. And then one time we called him on the phone and we made him all talk to us.
So that's a social ritual.
Yeah, and it was also the kind of in the advent of the internet too, so it was a lot of weird group going on Yahoo message boards and talking to strangers and pretending to be somebody else. This movie, we saw it in theaters, and then for a year we'd watch it every weekend as a group. It was the de facto sleepover, and we'd all have sleepovers at each other's houses. Right. So I probably watched this movie I don't know how many weeks or in a year, but over 50 times. And then I bought the soundtrack, and I bought the novelization. I wanted it in every form of, content that there was.
Right.
And I think because, for me, it was, this template, I was, 12 years old, so this is what your high school experience is going to be like. And then my high school experience was absolutely nothing like that.
Yeah. I mean, it occurred to me, watching it just a few days ago, Can't Hardly Wait is the last analog kids movie. There's a the same way Ronin is sort of the last analog action movie, which we talked about on the show earlier with Mark Slutsky. It's not a relic. It feels more like a time capsule, a little sliver.
Yeah.
Because of the one night concept.
And it's kind of like a yearbook. You see all these flashes of these actors from the 90s, Clea Duvall and Ethan Embry, and it's you see their headshot and then they're gone. And you're like, oh yeah, what happened to that guy?
Yeah, and there's also a new generation in it, the people that I hadn't expected to find, because the casting director on this one deserves a medal. They say, there's a whole documentary devoted to the idea that casting agents are the only above the
casting by
frontline, the frontline title, the only frontline credit that doesn't get its own Oscar nomination.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't be a movie like The Bourne Identity, where they get Brian Cox and Chris Cooper. It would be something like this, where virtually every speaking role is someone who's going to be back. They're all
totally. Yeah, there's a Jerry O'Connell uncredited cameo.
I wrote down a little list of all the people that I didn't know were in it this time, and it's who did I find? Amber Benson, Jason Segel, Sarah Rue, Selma Blair. I knew who she was, but I didn't know she was in this.
Yeah. She has 2 lines of dialogue.
Yeah, she's girl number 1 of something. Sean Patrick Thomas is in it. Did I mention Jennifer Elise Cox? I think she turned up on Voyager for a couple of seasons.
Oh.
It's just one of those. There is a real. Oh, and whoever it was that cast 6 Feet Under was clearly watching.
Yeah, right. Because Eric Balfour's in it.
Eric Balfour, Freddie Rodriguez, and Lauren Ambrose.
Oh,
I knew about Ambrose, but not the other two.
Yeah. Well, I think it was this weird dearth of there was kind of a drought of teen comedies for a couple years, you know?
Well,
sort of
horror
like,
movies had sort of taken over.
yeah, so it was like Dazed and Confused happened, and that was like more underground. Nobody really knew. And kind of a similar, like, sprawling American Graffiti-inspired, like, generational comedy with, like, a different friend groups kind of meandering together. And then it's like, for me, like, kind of like my puberty coincided with, like, She's All That and 10 Things I Hate About You and Can't Hardly Wait and like a bunch of even crappier ones that are like straight to DVD now, like Head Over Heels and what's that movie? Never Been Kissed.
Right.
And it was like I just consumed all of them, you know, because I didn't know better.
Yeah, well, but that's what they're for. Like
Yeah.
that's what that entire production line is aimed at, people who haven't really, you know, figured out how to discern.
Yeah. So yeah, in some ways it's like you just kind of, you're marketed the stuff and then you consume it and you don't know any better, and then later on you're like, oh, these actually like formed my sensibility and personality like way more than I thought they would.
Yeah.
And in some ways, like, also Dawson's Creek was like a huge thing for me, and that show started when I was in grade 6 and it ended by the time I was graduating high school. And so it's like all of these things like set kind of a template in my expectations for like what I thought high school was going to be like. And then in ways it made me feel like nostalgic for things that I never got to experience.
Right.
Because you're growing up thinking that you're going to be like sailing on a boat called True Love, like, which happens in Dawson's Creek. Or like you're going to lose your virginity on a ski trip. But then instead you're like 15 and working at Blockbuster and like, nobody likes you and you're like, you know, what's going on? Where's my like climactic prom date, you know?
And it's not even the first generation to have that sort of disappointment, right? I mean, I still don't fully know, because I was even more like a movie omnivore when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
But it was all, like, for guys, it was action movies, because the 80s was the peak, the pinnacle of the disposable action movie experience.
Yeah.
So I'm just always ready to tear a guy's throat out with my two fingers, like like Swayze does in that one time. But
yeah, I guess for my generation as a girl, like, yeah, these were all romantic comedies in some ways.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, that's how they were pitched, right?
Yeah,
because that was how you packaged them. There always had to be a primary heterosexual chase.
Yeah, it's like a teen girl with 3 names, like an actress with 3 names, and then it was like, you know, which one of these actresses is like gonna be in the situation where, and the thing is, the women were always pretty, like, in this movie, especially Jennifer Love Hewitt, like her character, like, her plans are undecided, and she has like absolutely no personality. She just has like huge hair, and like boobs,
and the halter top. She's the one actor who came in a halter. Character who came in a halter top.
She's a walking halter top.
Yeah. And
every guy in the movie just goes, "You're so hot. You're so hot. I really want to have sex with you." And she's like, "Oh no, I'm waiting for something big." And you're like, but what do you want to do? Like, how could you graduate high school and not have like any idea what is going to happen?
Yeah, it's weird because there's that one scene in the final third where the obvious misunderstanding is required, where she has the speech about her own lack of focus.
Right.
But it doesn't land. Like, it didn't land for me, because at that point, I think like the whole point of her character is world weariness. Mm-hmm. Having been through the pre-astronaut Mike Dexter.
Yeah, that's my
that
favorite
name just
thing.
totally blew it up.
I was like so obsessed with that when that happened in 30 Rock. So I was like, does she know that that's the character in Can't Hardly Wait?
She must. She must. She wrote Mean Girls. How could she not be aware of Can't Hardly Wait?
Oh, yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's like, once again, Tina Fey just proves to be the smartest person, not in the room, but in the building. Picks exactly the right name. And Hewitt's character will have been with this guy presumably for like 3.5 years, I guess, right? Because she showed up as a freshman.
I assume they're sexually active.
You would think. They'd read a good 5 years older than they need to be. So
yeah,
what's
definitely in their 20s.
Yeah,
everyone in this movie is actually so old looking.
Yeah, Ethan Embry, I looked this up. He was only 20 when he shot it, but he looks 30. Like, his hairline's like already going, and yeah. But with Hewitt's character, it just feels like at the last minute, somebody, probably Deborah Kaplan, because Kaplan and Elfont are working as a team, and they're usually really good about this stuff as writers.
Yeah.
They just figured out there was something missing about who she is and what she wants, and they still don't quite give her 3 dimensions.
It's like they decided that the Lauren Ambrose character was like fleshed out enough. Like they already had one kind of like compelling, like real life person in the movie that was a woman, so they didn't have to bother about like the romantic lead.
Yeah. Or maybe just casting her as the object means that she has to be an object. Although now we've seen films that manage to pull that off. And give her an actual personality.
Yeah.
I wonder, like the thing that struck me watching it again this time is that you've referred to it as Altman-esque, which is a really good call, I think. Like just the sort of weaving constant activity, and there's all these sub-stories going on. But it felt to me like right now there are 2 mumblecore movies fighting for dominance, and then you could have
in
one
the film.
Yeah, you could have one movie about Embry stalking Hewitt, and you can have another movie that's just Ambrose and Green, Lauren Ambrose and Seth Green locked in that bathroom.
It's true, actually. Like if the Duplass brothers were like remaking Can't Hardly Wait, it like.
This could be a Netflix
Ethan
series,
Embry
right?
would be like played by Jesse Eisenberg, and there'd be like an unnerviness about this.
Yeah.
Or it would be like that movie. Oh, what's that movie about? It's like a man. It's a boy's name. It's like an overweight boy that like has.
Oh, Terry.
Yeah. Which is really good.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the female character in that movie is really like pretty compelling and interesting.
Yeah. It feels weird. I mean, I hate to judge any movie by modern standard, because everything, like, and just in the 17 years since this came out, things have really changed.
Well, yeah, it once struck me because I hadn't seen it in a couple years, even though I own the DVD.
Yeah, and it's in your head all the time.
Yeah, it's just like embedded in my DNA. There's a lot of gay jokes. Like, there's a lot of jokes that just the punchline is like fag, or like, which is in the movie. I'm not
a couple of times.
Yeah, and in like and it's weird because I think even when I was watching it then, I knew that those jokes weren't actually funny, or like the sex comedy jokes, like the foreign exchange student, just like, I want to touch your penis.
Yeah.
Like, I remember my friends laughing really hard at that stuff, but it was almost like we didn't actually know it was funny. It's like you're learning language in that way. Like, I remember we kept quoting that line about, well, she's not prettier than Gwyneth, but we didn't really know what that meant, or who Gwyneth Paltrow really was at the time. We just, like, it was like almost like semiotics. Like, you're learning the language of how bitchy girls talk to each other at a party, so that you hope one day you can be those bitchy girls.
It's weird, right? I mean, so many high school movies are sort of designed for teenagers to imprint on, or at least that this is what cool is in that window.
Imprinting in like
moment.
the Twilight sense.
Yeah.
Like...
Oh yeah, very much so. You will do this.
Yeah.
Because we tell you to.
Yeah, it's true, and it's, I think, especially, I don't know, and now I watch it, and I remember like having like, I was so in love with like the Ethan Embry character in that movie, even though like I did not resemble Jennifer Love Hewitt in any possible way.
Right.
And I think it's because I actually wanted to be Ethan Embry. You know, like, I love that he's going to Dartmouth to do a workshop with Kurt Vonnegut, which is like so unfathomable because he just seems like this weird, like, bug-eyed, like, loon.
Yeah. There are qualities. I mean, he's sort of put forward as I mean, ultimately, I was going to say the Lloyd Dobler, but...
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
But it's actually the character that Cusack plays in The Sure Thing that I'm thinking of.
Oh, yeah, that's a great movie. Who is even more of an idealist and sort of a cockeyed literature hero, in that he's the questing character. Sort of... He's searching for, like, personal truth and, like, asking those deep questions. And he's, like, the thinker, and he's, like, you know, he's all about, like, fate, which is such a huge theme of teen movies, like, that things are fated or written in the stars because, like, your whole life hasn't been set out yet. So
and yet the high school movie exists to codify the idea that you are always going to be who you are, which I find so fascinating.
Totally. And I agree, actually, and I always think about in what ways, like, the things that you love when you're 15, the things you imprint on, like, kind of set, like, your destiny in motion. Like, if those are if it's pop culture that makes you who you are.
Oh, I absolutely agree.
I mean, I believe that, as opposed to, like, just your character as a human. Like, if I didn't, you know, if the Strokes hadn't come out when I was 15, would I have wanted to, like, move to New York and, like, interned at Spin and, like, been a music critic? Or, like, did I need that? I needed that record to, like, set my, like, destiny in motion. Yeah.
I've always believed that the stuff we love finds us as much as we find it. Just yesterday on Twitter, I found an old an original copy of the Infocom game Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and just tweeted the image like, you want to feel old? Look at this. And it's a 5 1/4 disc, and it just had liver spots on it basically. Mm-hmm. But Douglas Adams is the kind of token that touchstone that I think of it that way. It's that those books are out there forever and people will keep discovering them.
Yeah.
And it will sort of kink you into the right direction of where you already meant to go. If you find a talisman, it's there for you to find.
Absolutely.
And high school movies are really weird that way because they also say, well, jocks are always going to be jocks, brains are always going to be brains. The five Hughes versions of people from the Breakfast Club are always going to exist. But what you can do is move within them. Yeah,
or all those archetypes in the Breakfast Club, like everyone has that in them. What's interesting about this movie is it's very slated towards, like, the nerds will win and take over. Like, all the best people in the movie are actually, like, the underdogs and, like, the smartest people and the people that, like, that they're going to escape high school and they're going to be the people that they want to be. And one of the most devastating things I think about high school is, like, that moment where you're ready to move on, but you're just not able to be the person you want to be yet, and you have to, like, stick it out and shine it on a little longer.
Yeah.
And maybe you haven't found your people, or maybe people don't understand, like, the person you want to become, and you're just, like, faking it so hard, but you have, like, 2 or 3 years left, and then you're going to go to university, and you'll absolutely become that thing that you want to be, but it's, like, for now, you're just wearing, like, weird, ill-fitting pants from American Eagle, and, like, yeah, and I remember, like, in high school, like, I never drank, I never kissed anyone, I was, like, a super nerd, and I remember, like, my high school graduation, I was like, where's the party, you guys? Like, can't hardly wait, like, we gotta do this, and everyone's like, no, I don't think that there's gonna be a party. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I've been waiting, like, 4 years to, like, have my, like, can't hardly wait experience.
Yeah, promises were made.
Yeah, this movie showed me what my high school graduation was gonna be like. And I drank, like, one warm Molson Canadian in, like, my friend's garage and went home at, like, 11 p.m. on graduation night. And it was, like, so disappointing to me.
Yeah, I had much the same experience. I mean, I think the problem with high school, a friend of mine who is an actual academic has made an excellent case for the idea that the people who peak in high school, I've blown her theory. Her argument is that the people who are popular and cool and set in high school, they get stuck. And you actually see it in Can't Hardly Wait. It's the first sort of validation with the Trip character.
Which I've actually never seen in another movie, I don't think.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what's, like, cool about this movie, is it's, like, very slightly subversive, where they're, like, going, you should actually feel really sorry for this Mike Dexter character, because this is as good as it's going to get for him. And even he knows that. And the fact that he kind of redeems himself at the end, but then also doesn't.
Yeah.
It was, like, actually really interesting screenwriting, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's unsatisfying, which is what drama is, like, at its best. And you don't expect to find moments of clarity like that in this movie, especially after the good deed from earlier. But, yeah, the good deed is really just small. It's easy for him to do, and it's the kind of thing that no one else will ever know about.
Yeah.
And you picture it as the last decent act before you sink back into a life of going for your realtor's license. And, like, he doesn't get the it gets better moment that every other character gets. Even in the text, it's just, like, the movie really sort of doesn't care about him anymore.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's coming from, like, the personal worldview of the screenwriters that probably got fucked over by a Mike Dexter.
I would think, yeah.
Yeah. But also, it's like, I think Nick Hornby did this American Life episode, which I think about all the time, where he talks about going back to his high school reunion, and there was this guy who pushed him into a pool and humiliated him, and this was, like, a memory that he always had his whole life, and, like, basically it spurred him on to, like, become a writer and become the person he wanted to be. And then he went back to his reunion and he confronted this guy, and this guy was like, no, you pushed me into the pool, like, that never happened. Okay. So there's this kind of idea, like, that, I'm a nerd, and, like, the nerds are gonna win, and, like, everyone was against me in high school, but, like, look at me now, I'm hotter and sexier than ever. And then you're like, no, actually, I was a dick to lots of people and made other people feel like they weren't good enough. And, like, I think it's hard to have that kind of realization, because I think maybe everyone feels like that in terms of there's always someone that...
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why the movie's about the nerds or the underclass is the wrong term, but the underdogs are always going to do well, because even if you're the guy pushing people around, you still see yourself as most likely as the hero of your own story. So you need to be understood, and you identify with characters who aren't. I think the real, the genius of what Kaplan and Elfont do in this, and also in Josie and the Pussycats, which is a hugely underrated movie.
Totally. That movie is actually really incredibly smart and subversive, the way that the branding.
Oh yeah. Everything about it, it basically predicts what happened the decade that followed in terms of cross-promotional franchising corporations eating movies. But of course, it does it with a sense of humor and irony that is now sorely lacking from the Transformers franchise, which is, I think, the best example of what Josie and the Pussycats tried to stop.
Yeah.
But they see the patterns of human behavior at work there, in both in Can't Hardly Wait and in Josie, and they side with characters who are sort of already wrong by being so... Preston's not right about fate. He makes it happen.
Yeah.
By chasing her and by having a pure heart and understanding her. All of those things are true, but it's not that they're destined just because they had the same Pop-Tart. And other characters tell him this.
That's a very diluted thing.
Yeah. I mean, now it's about a stalker who happens to get lucky.
Yeah, because the girl in question is, vulnerable and damaged enough to be I'll go with this.
Yeah.
I can't, I have absolutely no idea of my identity in any way. I'm only defined by boys that like me and the relationships that I can be in. So I'm going to take this guy next. And
it's a really weird place to end. Although I think they sort of gave themselves an out by, the tag is that she wrote him a letter every day, so his act of devotion is repaid by something else, where presumably she gets to express all the depth and feeling that we don't see.
I know. I was thinking, what's in those letters?
Yeah.
I
want them
can't
to be,
imagine.
Spelled well. That's all.
Yeah, I don't want them to be on scented stationery or something.
Today I saw Dawson's Creek, and it made me feel sad because you weren't here to talk to about it.
Oh, that's right.
It would be like email or something now.
Oh, I thought you were telling me that.
Oh, I see.
Well, I think that it was such a weird time, the late 90s in terms of pop culture, because it was kind of such an ugly time, the fashion was really horrible, and the music was really bad, and Fred Durst was a cultural icon.
Yeah. This may be the only movie that uses Smash Mouth unironically and well. Just
it actually has defines... a perfect use of Smash Mouth.
And again, I go back to Kaplan and Elfont being just a little bit smarter than their studio, and just making that work. It's one of those things where I don't know if they picked the song because they thought it was appropriate or if it was imposed on them as part of a licensing package of songs.
Yeah.
But it worked.
Totally.
They found a way to make that work. But I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Well, I mean, the movie's named after a Platesman's song, which is anything that does that already has my money forever. And actually the soundtrack, I think, is actually incredible. It's I think one of the best soundtracks of all time.
It's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. It has Run DMC and Parliament Funkadelic and Guns N' Roses, which is an excellent use of Paradise City in the movie. And it's it's kind of how there's this sort of weird constellation of different genres and social groups in the movie. The soundtrack is equally omnivorous too.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. And also, one thing that's cool about this movie, too, is, it's in some ways really egalitarian. Even though there's all these different social groups, everyone's invited to this party. And you can see these kind of different weaving worlds and stories, intersecting with each other. And I think that's what was so exciting in my fantasy of how this, ultimate graduation party was going to go. It was going to be this night where, you could just float.
Right.
And everyone would kind of be there with, open, accepting arms, because... in the fantasy of your last day of high school, it's high school's over, so you can finally just be yourself, or you can take that chance, or you can go after that person that you've always wanted, or be the person you always wanted to be.
You can drop the factions once and for all, because now we're in the real world, except the real world is just as bad, if not worse.
Yeah.
As these characters don't discover, which is still that'll happen tomorrow, and they'll be disillusioned in their own time.
That's Reality Bites is almost the sequel, right?
Yeah.
Where it's okay, this is where you have a house now of Lauren Ambrose is the Ginny Garofalo character, and Winona Ryder is also the Lauren Ambrose character. Yeah. And Ethan Hawke is I don't know, kind of an amalgam of different people in the movie. But it's I think Julie Klausner said once that your 20s is the only part of your life that you don't realize is actually terrible. Like, everyone knows that high school is terrible, but your 20s are supposed to be amazing, and then you realize, no, they're even worse.
Yeah. That's actually true. It's because that's the period where now, anyway, now that who will be 47 next month, I'm still not middle-aged, technically, because I refuse to accept it. The 20s and 30s are sort of blurring into this weird space where you still get to find yourself. Like, I've always known what I wanted to do, and who I am hasn't really changed, which is probably why I still feel 12 in my head most days. But the push towards pushing that back for people, especially now that, with the state of the knowledge economy being what it is, where nobody really knows what they're going to be doing in 10 years. You can, you have vague goals or really concrete ones, but you can't be sure, like, the tracks no longer exist to establish people on, to develop a career as we used to know it.
Definitely.
And Can't Hardly Wait does sort of acknowledge that these people are all moving forward in a really unpredictable way. Like, their lives aren't going to go where they think they're going to go. And usually that kind of disillusionment waits for you in your mid-20s, as you were saying. And now, like, these kids are, like, they would be, 35 now, and who knows what they're doing. Yeah,
I mean, if this movie was made now, I mean, it's kind of weird for me because I'm 28, and I, like, through my 20s, it kind of went to the point where it's like, oh, jobs don't exist anymore. You're never going to actually have, like, a full-time job. It's going to pay you a salary and a benefits package, and you'll be able to, like, buy a house one day. Like, just forget about that. And, like, all you have are kind of these ephemeral constraints of, like, your personality. You have to market your personality and brand yourself so that people will want to, like, hire you for one-off freelance jobs. But that's not gonna, if you can like create a construct of who you are that people want to cash in on or something, that's how you'll be able to survive. But if you're not willing to do that, then good luck to you.
Yeah. Well, it's we want to be in the Chandler Levack business.
Yeah, I don't want to be in it. I don't.
This is a phrase I've never heard directed with me involved.
If someone ever said that to me, I would just, like, throw up.
Or sign.
Or I'd be like, here's, Yeah. But it's strange.
It's and I guess that's why I'm so struck by watching it now, is that the world still exists. Like, that is still, I'm sure, a reality of teenage life, is that you have your people, and the intersections with other groups are just, that's what happens at a party.
Yeah.
But the world is so different now, and even the way teenagers relate. I mean, high school, I hope, is a better place for people now that the internet exists and is so pervasive, because you're never alone.
Yeah.
Even if you are physically isolated, there's still a whole world that you can access. I mean, God knows what, I probably never would have left the basement. I would have just watched everything I could have watched online. I would have spent hours on, Mubi and Fandor just gobbling movies that weren't available to me.
Yeah, well, it's kind of weird because, I mean, kids these days, they have access to everything, and I can't imagine having access to everything. Yeah. And so, like, the kind of delineations between culture, like, don't exist anymore. Like, to them, like, I don't know, like, Selena Gomez and Led Zeppelin are on the same part because they can download it instantly.
Yeah, you can be as well versed in obscure hip-hop artists of the 90s as you can be in, like, Cat Stevens records from the 70s.
Yeah, and they know so much more because it's like they don't have distinctions. Mm-hmm. When, I think for me, like, I had to work backwards, so, like, the Strokes were my favorite band, so that's how I found out about, like, the Velvet Underground and television and, like, you have to go in reverse. Right. And I think, even with Can't Hardly Wait, like, you pick up on those influences. You go, oh, Kurt Vonnegut, okay, I'm going to track that down. Right. Or Guns N' Roses, okay, what's that, And in some ways, it feels like you have to earn things more because you're, like, doing deep digging, I guess, to find them.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to tell you about the latest Shiny Things newsletter, my weekly dispatch about physical media, culture, and maybe even the odd streaming thing. I just dropped that comprehensive run through Paramount's new 4K Star Trek discs I promised, and later this week I'll be tackling Greg Mottola's Confess Fletch and Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, among other things. Subscribe for the price of a latte at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Twitter account. I missed writing about movies. I'm glad I'm back at it. Come check it out. Like, it would have taken me forever to find out what happened to Charlie Korsmo.
Yeah.
Whereas I could just Wikipedia him and find out that he went to MIT.
Yeah, he's a lawyer now?
And he's on the board of MIT and Yale, and he was appointed by Barack Obama to the board of trustees of a Barry Goldwater Foundation.
Whoa.
So, yeah.
And he was the kid in Hook, too.
He was the kid in Hook. And it's really weird to see his plot line, because I don't know that it works. Like, that's the one that feels the most dated of all of them, because it is the Revenge of the Nerd angle.
Yeah.
And
I think he's really good in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, his performance and Seth Green's are, like, the most committed.
Yeah,
and
well, Green, Jesus, yeah. There's a special box.
I got to have sex tonight.
That is a role that I think could have destroyed someone else's career.
I know.
And probably should have. But in terms of the likability of Seth Green and the fact that he is willing to just not back down.
Yeah.
From that, even have a scene about it.
Yeah.
Where he refuses to drop it. When not only challenged, but like pushed. That's a really brave performance in its own way, and I think he'd already made Idle Hands, or Idle Hands was right around that same window,
right,
where he was just suddenly this strange comic energy in things.
And was he in Buffy the Vampire Slayer too?
Yeah, he and Amber Benson, who played Tara, both show up in this film before Buffy, or before they made it onto Buffy. And Green, well, there's even a moment in the film, although he's not involved in it, where the problem, this is the problem I have with the Korsmo thing too, it's not the lead, it's the sidekicks.
Yeah.
His X-Files buddies are so one-dimensional, identikit nerds.
I know.
That they almost drag him down.
I agree. And it's like they're not really put to good use at all.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they're isolated by nature. The plot has them hiding out on the roof for the entire movie.
Yeah, and they keep cutting back to them like, aren't these guys hilarious? They're quoting but like buzz lines from the X-Files, and you're like, not really, like I'm not interested in them.
Yeah. I just kept thinking Kevin Smith, for all his faults as a self-indulgent pop culture writer guy, at that point he would have come up with something for them to do, because they kind of are the Jay and Silent Bob.
Yeah.
Functionaries.
Yeah.
In terms of stay there and be quippy, so when this movie comes out in 6 months, everyone will say, oh, they knew about the X-Files.
Although I remember, like, that line killing me when they're like, people might even be having sex tonight.
Which is as alien to them as the Greys.
Right. But then his Seth Green's friends, they like drop the N-word.
They do, and they also have to be more oblivious in order to redeem him, which is like the nerds that Korsmo's surrounded with have to be more nerdy, because he has to be able to have his secret coolness. Yeah. Which is probably the least cool thing I've ever seen, but the fearlessness sells it, and it's the same thing that Green does. It's the idea that these guys are just not going to drop that part.
Yeah, I think they're so committed to it, and then there's like so many cool committed characters, like Sarah Rue, and like her, like, you are all sheep. It's like really, she just really throws herself into it, and I think that's kind of what's cool. And then you can also kind of hang out with someone for a second, like, I love the scene between, I think it's Jason Segel and, like, that guy with, like, the hair. They're, like, stoners. Who I saw in a bunch of teen movies and just, like, dropped off the face of the earth.
Yeah, I couldn't find him. I didn't dig that hard, admittedly, but it was one of those guys who was like, oh, he was that guy.
Yeah, I always really liked him.
Look that made him memorable.
Exactly.
But nothing.
And then they're like, I think he wears, like, t-shirts and
yeah.
And it's like, I mean, kind of like an Altman movie, you just sort of hang out with someone for a second, and then it's like the film drops away and you're in this world, and then it's like, okay, now we're going over here. And that kind of like the way that they've shot it with these kind of like whip pan, like languid sort of steady cam takes like all through all the levels of the house and stuff. Yeah. And I like that, and I think it is true in high school, like, because you're yourself and you're caught up in like your own little community, and you're so in your head that it's like, oh, there's the guy that wears that shirt, or like, I love the guy that shoplifts everything.
Yes.
The scene. He's like such an American Pie. He was on the American Pie movies.
Yeah, the future Shermanator.
Yeah. Oh, the Shermanator.
Who, again, has one purpose in all of those movies. Yeah. He's just got that kind of ferrety, weaselly aspect where it's like, yep, I believe this guy's doing these things.
He has the best face. Yeah. Yeah, I think in the 90s it was a lot easier just if you had a face. They'd be like, okay, you're going to be in like 7 Jennifer Love Hewitt movies.
Right. Yeah. Or if you're Jennifer Love Hewitt. That's how that works. I mean, just she's one of those actors who, it's weird, I like her in this film because she's trying to fill the character in. There's stuff going on. She's not coasting. No. Which is...
You get a sense that she has a soul to her.
Yeah.
Even though she has, like, literally nothing to work with.
Yeah. I just get the sense that... And they hung it on her because she is... Like, she was... I suppose at that point she'd already made I Know What You Did Last Summer, which was a verified box office hit and is therefore the reason to cast her in stuff.
And she was in Party of Five, I think.
Had she? Yeah, of course she'd already done that.
Now she's just in a show where she delivers hand jobs to people.
I don't fully understand her purpose as an actor. I mean, I guess that's pretty simple. But it's a weird place to occupy, because even though they're invoking Gwyneth, like, Gwyneth wasn't Gwyneth then. I don't think Gwyneth was ever Gwyneth. I'm not sure when this is supposed to have happened, where she was this...
I think they're talking about, like, mid-90s Gwyneth,
Yeah.
when she was dating Brad Pitt, and she'd been in, like, Great Expectations and Seven, and, you know...
Yeah. She had that little window where she was...
Sliding Doors.
Yeah, the romantic movie star icon kind of thing.
Yeah.
But by that point, she was in Shakespeare in Love. She won the Oscar that year. And it's like, I get it, but I don't... Like, I never thought she was... It's weird. It's like the whole Jennifer Aniston, Gwyneth Paltrow thing that happened in the 90s. They're actors who are more relatable than stunning. So it was kind of neat to see them become massive pop culture figures, but then people trying to create the next one inevitably had no idea what they were looking for, which is how you get the scene where Jennifer Love Hewitt, who has no, like, there's no comparison on any level between the two of them, except maybe that they have big heads, but all actors have big heads.
She has a huge head.
She does.
Yeah, she's just kind of all, like, fluttering eyelids, and then, like, she has all these monologues where she's kind of like, you don't know me, and, like, I'm not that girl. And then you're like, okay, but, like, you are that girl. Like, you've literally nothing else to do in the movie. And, like, when, you know, in his letter, he's talking about, you know, how there's something about her that other people don't know about. But it's like, he never pins it down. Yeah,
that's the thing. No one ever says, or she's never led to the point by the script or the dialogue that she's given, you know, if you're not that girl, who are you? Like, what is it that you do or want or are?
And I think that's, like, a thing that, for me, like, consuming all these movies, it was like, oh, well, you can be Jennifer Love Hewitt, and that's what guys want. They want this kind of, like, fantasy object to, like, hang their hopes and dreams on. But you know, it's like, what if you even being that girl doesn't seem that awesome because you have, like, nowhere else to go. Even if the guy gets you, it's like, then you're stuck with this, like, weird dweeb. Even if he's in a Kurt Vonnegut writing workshop.
He will someday be shortlisted for the Booker, and he will probably kill 2 or 3 people who look at you funny. But those are his defining qualities.
But it's like, you know, I think there's some movies that they've managed to deconstruct that girl. Like, even in The Breakfast Club, Molly Ringwald's that girl, but there's a lot going under the surface there.
Yeah. And the one incredibly well-developed female character in the film that I wanted to, like, not acknowledge is Lauren Ambrose, who is just, you know, great.
She's amazing. She's so cool in this movie.
And hostile in an interesting way. Like, she's never off-putting unless you're supposed to understand that her defense mechanisms are getting in her own way. It's a really... I mean, she would then be amazing on 6 Feet Under.
Yeah.
But this is the movie where she really kind of stretches out and shows you that she's capable of almost anything.
It's true, and you're kind of like, well, why can't Preston like her? Like, is it...
Yeah. And they've already dealt with it. Well, it predates the movie, which is so great that there's, you know...
It's a great backstory,
Yeah, it's a device that I usually don't buy because, you know, oh, this is why we could never be together. But then while you watch the movie, you realize, oh, that's right, yeah, they wouldn't. Like, he's insane and she didn't have any patience for it.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, maybe not insane. But she's also not defined by her relationship or her desire for a relationship.
Yeah.
She's completely content to not even go to the party.
It's true. Like, in a lesser movie, she'd be kind of like the Mary Stuart Masterson character in Some Kind of Wonderful, where she'd be, like, hanging around with this, like, unrequited crush and, you know, helping him find his dream girl, but then being like, I've been waiting for you my whole life. Yeah. And that was kind of also the Dawson's Creek dynamic, too.
Sure.
And it's like, I think...
I mean, in Dawson's Creek, everybody's waiting for everybody else. Which is so fascinating.
It's a show about waiting for people.
We have, and it's the theme song.
Yeah.
But
it's same with Can't Hardly Wait. It's like, there's something so romantic about that idea of, like, what's my life gonna be? And I don't want to wait for it to be over, and I can't hardly wait for the future and stuff. And
that I only have this limited dating pool to draw from.
I know. And that's the really frustrating thing about high school. It's like knowing what you want, but just not being able to actually obtain it yet.
Yeah.
So you're just waiting, and everything's unfulfilled, and it feels so high stakes because, like, that's it.
Yeah. I think that's why Ambrose's character is the most interesting to me, is that she doesn't, like, she knows better. She's the worldly wise one instead of the world weary one.
Yeah.
She's clearly got values and goals that don't involve high school. Like, she's
Totally.
ready to move forward.
Yeah.
But ends up, like, literally trapped in a small space with somebody who...
The worst person.
Yeah, who represents the absolute worst aspects of that thing about not knowing who you are.
Yeah. Oh, that's really smart.
Why, thank you.
And
I didn't do it, though.
you should be a professional film critic. But it's true. And also, like, but it doesn't mean that she's not vulnerable or she doesn't get hurt or that she's, like, impervious to, you know, that guy rejecting her later, or, you know, like, she's smarter than it, but she's also still in it, and she's still, like, vulnerable and a human being. And I think that's what's so wonderful about her performance, is, like, you see her in her eyes, especially that last scene where they're, like, they're in the diner together, and she kind of looks at him, and she's like, oh my god, I know this guy's, like, a fucking idiot, but here we go again. Yeah. You know, and it's like, you know that those two aren't going to last, and she's going to go to NYU and probably lead a pretty great life, but in that moment, it's like, well, this is what I have to work with.
Yeah. I assume she grew up to make this movie. Like,
that would be cool.
She's the narrator character that we don't ever acknowledge. Because she's also smart enough that she'd pull back. Like, she would make herself the center of her own movie.
But watching this movie as, like, a 12-year-old girl, I wasn't, like, smart enough to go, like, be Lauren Ambrose. I was like, oh, I want to be Jennifer Love Hewitt. Yeah. But then you're like, there's nothing there, you know? That's kind of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl thing, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Twilight earlier.
I love the Twilight movies.
Yeah. Well, but Kate has this brilliant theory, I think, about what the Twilight films do, and it's have Bella be an absolute zero. Like, she doesn't exist except to be fought over, desired, or told how great she is. And as a young woman reading that book, you can be Bella, because everyone, and it's basically who Jennifer Love Hewitt is in this film. She's the Bella. She's there to be desired and fought over, but she goes with wherever, like, she goes with the current. Bella will be tempted by Jacob. Why we don't know. I mean, I haven't read the books. I've seen all the movies. God help me. But she's as passive in her own story as Bella is. Yeah. And what's really weird is the one time she asserts any kind of, it's not even agency, it's just will, and says, you don't know me at all, and then not putting together who Preston is, which is kind of weird, and that it's I described it earlier as the third act complication. It's the necessary obstacle to the perfect relationship. Yeah. Which every movie has to have.
The kiss at the train station at the end.
Every one of these movies has to have the moment where things don't work, so they can redeem them later, so they can earn their triumph, which they've already been fighting for which one of them has been fighting for years. And Hewitt sells it. I mean, like, she sells the anger, and she sells the agency.
That is the best part of the movie.
Yeah, and it's weird, right? Because all of a sudden, it's like, oh yeah, you have feelings and opinions. I didn't think you would.
Yeah, I thought you were just giant hair and like a halter top. Yeah, it's true. I mean,
so if you watch the movie from that perspective and wanting to identify with her, or already identifying with her, what's your takeaway? Like, how do you relate to that character?
I mean, I don't think that I did. I think when I watched this movie, I think I had a crush on the Preston character because I probably wanted to be the Preston character, you know? I think there's that kind of common trope with, like, women when they consume things like this where it's like, you have a crush on the guy in the band, but then it's like, no, you actually want to be the guy in the band, or, it's not enough to, like, sleep with Will Ferrell, you actually want to be Will Ferrell. Right. And I think women a lot of times, like, get confused as, like, the people that they idolize, these guys in pop culture or whatever, or their crushes. It's like all the things that you want from that person, the reason that you're putting that person on a pedestal is because they're all qualities that either you have in yourself or you want to have. And it was always so frustrating for me because I feel like the Prestons in high school or whatever, they didn't want, like, their equivalent. They want, like, objects like Jennifer Love Hewitt. Right. And then you also realize that when you talk to those guys, a lot of times they're really hostile and weird and arrogant, and they don't want to be on a level playing field with you anyways. So in a lot of ways, it's like you should just be dating, like, the Jason Segel, like, licking up the watermelon on the floor guy, because maybe he's going to treat you better than some guy who's going to be, like, intimidated by the fact that you know all the same cool books as them and live in they inhabit their headspace or something.
Yeah. Well, that was another big trope in the 90s too, right? With She's All That and things. Teaching people how to be better.
Exactly.
For you.
Yeah. Yeah. Or Or now this weird Manic Pixie Dream Girl thing where it's like, oh, you like the Smiths too?
Yeah.
They're like a band that only I know about. And, you know, as if, I mean, that's kind of a thing in high school. You imagine this perfect person who's going to like all the same bands as you and all the same books as you. And, you know, it's like enough that you're kind of governed by references alone.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, no, that's not enough to sustain a relationship on at all. But it seems like it is at the time.
Well, it's a template, right? Like, it's where you build. But yeah, one of the things that Kate and I first bonded over was Beatles stuff, which, you know, you think is the most basic and iconic, that she grew up in the north of England, and
yeah.
I think she was kind of impressed that a Canadian kid would have the same insane love of it. But that's something you start a conversation with. It's not where you fall. It's not where you finish.
Yeah. I mean, I watched, I think I watched some episodes of Gilmore Girls, which was another, like, early mid-90s thing, and that's, you know, she starts a relationship with this guy because he knows all the same books as her, and it's like, that's, yeah, I think when you're really young, that's like what you have. All you have are your cultural references, you know? Sure.
Well, in high school, you know, the badges on your jacket are your signifiers. It's your armor.
Yeah. And I think what's really important, what this film's about identity and how people see themselves. And, you know, the reason everyone's kind of this flash in the pan stereotype, and you're just flitting through all these different subcultures and groups, and you're going, okay, there's like the jocks, and there's the huge stoners, and there's the girl who needs everyone to sign her yearbook because like memories are all we have. And it's just an interesting question, like, because now I think about high school, I'm gonna sound like maybe kind of a bitch now, but like I don't remember most of the people that I went to high school with. Like when I was in high school, it was this huge formative thing, and now 10 years away from it, like it doesn't really read in my life, you know. I remember like the frustration of who I wanted to be and the person that my expectations were so high for what I thought high school was going to be, and then, you know, it was disappointing.
Yeah.
But, you know, I managed to, like, all the coming of age experiences I thought I was going to have in high school, I had like 3 years later, and again like 5 years later. So it's like it does catch up with you, even if you're like a late bloomer. And there's something about all that kind of like wanting and how vulnerable you are and like what you think the world's going to be like. You're so open, and that's almost something that you should really treasure, because now I'm dead inside.
It's we're all dead inside. Anybody in the arts fields, that's how it has to be. That's your armor. But no, you're absolutely right. And again, to go back to my academic friend's point, you are not necessarily done when you're finished high school. Like, it's an arbitrary release point. Yeah,
people think it's supposed to be this entire like formative gestation period for you, and then like you come out fully formed into like the person you want to be and who you are.
Yeah.
But actually, I think college is way more important.
I would say. I mean, college is where you go to be exposed to things. Like the idea of the set curriculum in high school, you know, you only get to see the same things everybody else sees. Although now I'm sure within that there are other ways to find stuff and just go out and be who you want to be earlier. But, yeah, I certainly, like, I wasn't done when I was 18.
No. And I think that's the frustrating thing about high school. I mean, depending on where you go, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people meet, like, their absolute best friends and the love of their life, and they have all these incredible experiences. And that's not to, like, you know, undervalue my friends in high school,
sure, yeah,
you know, who were awesome. I just, like, I didn't meet my people. And I think meeting your people is everything. I met them later in university. And again, later, you know, when I went to the Canadian Film Center and stuff. But it's like...
Well, that's how you build your tribe, right? Like,
yeah,
you have to figure out what you want before you can know what you want to share.
Yeah.
And that's how it goes.
And it felt like, with a lot of these 90s teen movies, it's all about, like, kind of the subculture and these cliques. Mm-hmm. But it's not... I think in the 80s, it was more about the individual. Especially in the 70s, it's about the individual.
Oh, absolutely, in the 70s, yeah. And the 80s is sort of that weird midpoint where it started to get taken over by major corporate interest studios buying studios and reorienting. Can he have him wear Nikes? Can we do that? Can we get some Reeboks on this guy?
I'm trying to think of, like I guess American Graffiti is, like, the defining teen movie of the 70s.
Yeah, well, Last Picture Show.
Oh, yeah.
But it's too nostalgic. Like, they're both nostalgic, but I think I was going to say...
it's weird because they're replicating an earlier time.
Yeah, they're the ones that sort of lock down the idea of a nostalgia picture.
Yeah.
With period soundtracks and specific details. Those
and
were
for
boomer
me,
movies.
like, nostalgia is kind of like the defining thing of high school, right? Because it's like you're nostalgic at the same time as you're experiencing things. Like, you fall in love and you know that, like, the way that you fall in love is never going to be the way you're going to fall in love again. So even when you're feeling things, you know that this is as deeply as you're going to feel them.
Yeah. Well, there's the self-awareness now because everything has to be recorded.
Documented.
Yeah, recorded and preserved.
Yeah.
And the movies teach us that because so many movies begin with that was the summer where everything changed, and like you have to.
It's true.
You're braced to every new experience is going to be the formative thing, the crux of your life, the crucial formative moment.
And it's weird because I love coming of age movies so much, and that idea of coming of age is so cool and important to me. And in this movie, I don't really feel like anybody does come of age.
No, yeah.
Because it's also surface level, you know? You don't really hang out with anyone long enough to really understand how they're processing things or what it means to them. I mean, I think actually, like, the Mike Dexter's character is, like, really interesting because it's, like, it is, like, a pretty, like, cynical statement in a way. Like, this guy's going to be the same. And he's not going to change, and his life's going to suck.
He's met his future self. And it's terrifying, but he doesn't know how not to be that, so he retreats into it at the end. Yeah. The thing that my one great takeaway from this is that all 4 members of Du Jour are in this movie, so I just assumed that that's where they came from. The next day over pancakes, they figured it out and became Du Jour.
Oh, Du Jour. Yeah.
Right. For the
that's
the
where...
Pussycats. Yeah, all
that's
4
so
actors.
Interesting.
All 4 cast members.
It's also so cool that this movie is made by, like, a man and a woman, like, screenwriting team. Screenwriting directing team.
Yeah, whose work is never quite as good if they don't direct it, which is really fascinating.
Yeah,
they co-wrote the Flintstones sequel, which no one speaks of.
That's horrible. Maid of Honor.
Of Honor, that horrible Patrick Dempsey movie.
Yeah, that movie's really shitty.
Oh, it's terrible. Leap Year, the one with Amy Adams and Matthew Good.
Oh, that movie's awful too.
Yeah, and Surviving Christmas, which is underrated, the Ben Affleck, Christina Applegate comedy that's actually really clever, but
I've never heard of it.
No, it was beaten to death by Gigli like the week before, and it was right at that time when Ben Affleck was poisoned. But it's like, seek it out, folks. It's a surprisingly good comedy with Ben Affleck, Christina Applegate, and James Gandolfini.
Oh, I'm down.
Gets no credit
Christmas
whatsoever,
themed?
And it's a Christmas movie. It's about a not a billionaire. He's wealthy enough that he can afford to hire people to pretend to represent his family for and have the Christmas he never had. It's funny. It's not perfect, and it was underserved by its director, who went for a more slapsticky vibe. But the ideas of it are as clever as what Kaplan and Elfont do here and in Josie. It's just, you kind of have to go in knowing they wrote it, or else you'll just write it off, apparently. Which is what happened to everyone else but me. But yeah, so to wrap the standard wrapping question, what have you taken away from this? Have you ever cribbed or stolen an idea from what they've done in this film to further your own work?
Good question. I'm trying to think. I wrote like a screenplay that was set in like a college newspaper kind of environment that starts with like, it's kind of bookended by 2 big parties. So, and it's about like this, I'm just going to pitch my movie over the podcast. It's about this like student reporter who she like investigates the world of professional pickup artists and tries to like use their techniques to lose her virginity.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a gross out comedy through like a female lens. And she has this like big crush on her editor who assigns her the story, and then she kind of goes out, and then she hangs out with all these pickup artists. And it's based on an article that I wrote when I was 19 for my school newspaper, where I hung out with a bunch of professional pickup artists. So I think what I like about this movie is that I like the reversals of all the characters. I like that people are presented one way, and then you actually see them kind of go through something, and everyone sort of gets what they want, or gets what they deserve, I guess, by the end of it. But it does feel like these are characters that their identity's in flux, and they're presenting themselves as something that they know that they're actually not, which I think is always interesting to me. And I like seeing... I think it's just a really fun movie. I like the way that they weaves through all these... I like big ensemble comedies. I think they're really hard to pull off well.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that this one, especially in this high school setting, at this big house party, is really brilliant and economical. And the casting's really inspired. And it's like structurally really well made. Even though there's lots of parts of it that are kind of outdated and... homophobic and racist and weird, it does feel like the movie's trying to do something, and it's asking those big questions in a really popcorny way, but it's actually way smarter than critics or just regular people might give it credit for.
Yeah.
And
I certainly agree with that.
I feel tender about it because it, was a movie I watched every day when I was 12.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's always a part of me that's always going to like it, even though, it's not Say Anything, which is like a movie I also watched, and that movie, like, or Almost Famous, which like actually formed my identity as a human being. But there's something about the movie that's very sweet and earnest, and I think it's like, it asks big questions about the high school experience, and is it really something that is going to dictate the course of your life, or what your expectations are going to be for life after high school. But for one night, if you can live out your high school experience and get everything you want and be the person that you always thought that you could be, what would that be like? So in some ways, I'm just babbling on and on.
No, it's good.
It's like a fantasy, I guess, and it was a fantasy for me when I was 12, of what a perfect night after you graduate could be, where like all of your expectations could be fulfilled, even if they weren't for like all 4 or 5 years.
Right. And so you didn't have that experience the night you graduated. Did it ever pay off? Did you ever have a night like this?
I mean, I lived in Montreal when I was 24, and that was a pretty awesome summer of just like going to concerts and drinking a lot in the park, and I got in like a bunch of accidents just from being drunk all the time. And I think, I always wanted to have this like group of friends, and you would do everything together, and you'd all kind of like come of age at the same time, and this kind of sprawling group of friends where everyone hung out with each other and dated and went to parties together. And for like one summer I had that experience, because a lot of the times I think you're just waiting for these people that are going to understand you, and it is really hard to find people that understand you.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why I like Can't Hardly Wait, even though I don't identify with anyone necessarily. I think the movie gets me. Like, it feels like it knows me.
That's so important, right? I mean, I think as a filmmaker, just like wanting your audience to have fun and like enjoy what's happening, and like it's so entertaining, and like not being afraid to really go for like sincerity, and the character Preston is so earnest and kind of overbearingly so, but the fact that he like really loves this girl and wants to be with her, like I was really struck by that again, just how much sincerity he has, and how much that he thinks this high school relationship is actually going to mean something and be this defining moment in his life. And I think that's what I love about Cameron Crowe movies too, is just how much the characters they mean the things that they do.
Yeah.
And I think for me in my work, it's easy to kind of feel like a little bit cynical and kind of lose that level of sincerity, or put a veil over things so that the audience can feel a little bit removed or cool with you being cool. But actually going for things and being sincere about your feelings, especially in screenwriting, this is the most important thing, that like the things that your characters are doing have value for them.
Yeah. And
they're at a place in their life where like this means a lot to them. Yeah.
Show me someone cares about something and I will care about that.
Yeah.
Or I'll care about them caring about it. And sometimes it reads as fake, and this one, it earns it, I think.
Yeah. There's something weird, like when he goes, first time I saw him in that like kind of shrunken red coat, and he hops over the thing, I was like, whoa, I'm like, my grade 7 self is like coming out of me as I'm like watching this, and like, I remember just loving the way that he looks so much, and now I'm like, oh, that's a coat I would probably wear, and like, I kind of evolved to the point where I'm like, oh, I think I want to be that guy, not have him kiss me in a train station.
Right. Well, that's good. You get to be your own hero.
Yeah. And I think that's like with high school, the most important thing is like, and I'm still trying to figure it now as a 28-year-old, is like being comfortable with who you are and knowing that you're going to go through life as yourself, and that's like the best person that you can be.
Yeah. You'll get there. I mean, middle age is until you're like 53 now. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
My thanks to Chandler Levack, who was kind enough to say yes immediately when I asked if we could re-release this episode more than 7 years after the recording. Her wonderful first feature, I Like Movies, has 2 more screenings at TIFF. Tomorrow, Wednesday, September 14th at 6:30 p.m. at the TIFF Bell Lightbox 3, and Friday, September 16th at the TIFF Bell Lightbox 2 at 9:45 p.m. You should go if you can, and if you can't, there will be a theatrical release later this year. You can follow Chandler on Twitter at clevack, Clevack, no spaces, and you can find Can't Hardly Wait on Blu-ray and DVD from Sony Pictures Home Entertainment and streaming on Hollywood Suite and CTV.ca in Canada and on the Freevee Amazon channel in the US. It's also available to rent or buy on various VOD platforms. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 45 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll like it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you enjoyed it, or this show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your booster when you can. I'll see you at the festival.